Chosen one, look at you. Yes, you. Do you even realize who you are? Do you have any idea how rare it is to carry what you carry? You've been walking through storms that would have crushed anybody else. And somehow, you still show up, still breathing, still blazing, still undeniable. This isn't just another day. And you're not just another face in the crowd. You are the kind of soul that makes darkness nervous just by waking up. You've been through things you don't even talk about. And yet you shine like nothing touched you. That's not luck. That's proof you're chosen. Proof you're dangerous to everything that tried to break you. So take a moment. Breathe it in. You're not here by accident. You're not overlooked. You're not ordinary. You are walking evidence that favor is louder than fear. And nothing, not curses, not critics, not even the weight of your past, has the authority to stop you. You didn't just survive. You wrecked their plans without even knowing it. And the best part? You're just getting started. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. What they couldn't comprehend is that you dismantled them without even noticing. While they scrambled to orchestrate elaborate schemes, your quiet endurance toppled everything they built. They switched masks, trying one tactic after another, yet none could breach the quiet strength you carried. Not out of superstition, but because a different kind of battle had already been decided, and you stood on the side that cannot lose. They constructed elaborate strategies, summoned shadows, assembled their forces, and relied on borrowed strength, but even that fell short. They wagered on your collapse, expecting you to unravel under weight you never should have survived. Yet you moved forward, bearing your history, breathing through the chaos, carrying a quiet blaze they couldn't name. Their frantic effort to engineer outcomes clashed against your natural rhythm, and their calculations fell apart. They assumed you would descend to their level, retaliate on their terms, and meet them in their chosen arena. Instead, you stayed rooted. Everything around you fractured, not because you retaliated, but because what you embody does not obey their designs. They didn't anticipate that just existing outside their game would undo it entirely. They exhausted their arsenal, only to find your quiet persistence was the very thing undoing them. Where they demanded spectacle, you carried something they couldn't replicate. Their imitations of influence couldn't measure up to the quiet certainty you were entrusted with. That certainty can't be stolen or faked. It simply exists where it belongs. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. Now they've learned they can't reach you. Not because nothing can touch your body, but because nothing can dislodge what anchors you. Their tactics dissolved, their plans fell silent, and all the while you were simply looking for your own clarity, unaware that each step you took disassembled what they thought was unshakable. That kind of presence defies preparation, defies understanding. It isn't something taught in their circles, but something born entirely beyond them. It was never a fair fight, and that's what startled them. They amassed their forces like a crowd gathering to watch a downfall, convinced that sheer presence could tip the scales. They stacked opinions, whispers, and intentions like bricks, imagining it would be enough to cage you. What they failed to grasp is that real weight doesn't come from how many stand behind you, but from where you're anchored. That anchor ran deeper than anything they could assemble. Their noise was loud, but it lacked substance. They drew their confidence from each other's applause, while you drew yours from something they couldn't trace. No badge, no ceremony, no ritual earned it. What you carried was beyond replication. It wasn't borrowed, it wasn't taught, it simply was. They mistook your lack of visible allies for weakness, unaware that you walked under a banner they couldn't even perceive. Feel God's love stirring within you? Don't let it stop there. Hit the super thank you button and sow a seed of $20 or more. That simple act can ignite hope, heal hearts, and carry His love further than you imagine. You were made to shine His light. This is your moment. Be the miracle someone's been praying for. Let heaven move through you. Their strategy hinged on intimidation, but they met someone who refused to flinch. No counterattack, no rage, no frantic defense, just a quiet refusal to move from your place. That stillness disturbed them, because it revealed how fragile their construction really was. While they were busy weaving nets, you had already stepped beyond their reach. They tried to bleed you out slowly, not with a single strike, but by carving little cracks, hoping you'd crumble over time. They came at you sideways, with sudden doubts, with subtle betrayals, with relentless undercurrents meant to wear you down from the inside. 1,000 minor blows meant to drain you, to hollow out your resolve until you disappeared. Instead, you became heavier, harder to shake, impossible to unseat. That confused them. By their measure, you should have splintered long ago. Your thoughts shattered, your strength depleted. They thought you'd vanish before the year ended, but each season only carved more depth into you. They planned for a short campaign, but you endured long enough that their breath ran out before yours. Every attempt to shatter, you only sharpened what was already there. They tried to make you forget yourself through exhaustion, but the longer you stood, the more you remembered who you are. They learned too late that you don't dismantle someone like you by scattering pieces, because each piece knows how to return home. No spectacle, no spell, no words from you. Just presence. You kept showing up, quietly refusing to sink, quietly refusing to rot. They waited for the silence to consume you, but you kept walking through it. Their calculation failed because they didn't know that scars can glow instead of closing. They didn't see that some are not undone by trials, they are summoned by them. What unsettled them most was realizing the battle turned against them without you even lifting a hand. Every time they hurled something at you, it collapsed before reaching its mark. Not because you hid behind barriers or performed elaborate defenses, but because what lives in you was never built to hold their poison. No cracks for their schemes to seep through, no space for their malice to settle. Their assaults did not land. Instead, they fractured back into the lives that birthed them. Resentment, deception, chaos. Each shot ricocheted, scattering more ruin in their own direction than they intended. They anticipated watching you buckle and unravel under the weight of what they threw, but instead they watched their own stability splinter under pressure they created. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. Some began to feel the very disruptions they orchestrated. Sleeplessness, sickness, discord, everything slipping through their fingers. Not because you retaliated, but because what they attempted was never theirs to wield. They struck at someone carrying something they couldn't recognize, and it cost them dearly. You didn't even notice their full effort. You were preoccupied with growth, focused on becoming, and all the while their work collapsed, like scaffolding kicked from its foundation. What you carried didn't just resist their intentions, it revealed them. Without a word, you illuminated the shadows they tried to operate in. Your calm after their storm made their noise look pitiful. Your progress after their sabotage hollowed out their confidence, not by proving anything, but simply by being. And that quiet revelation rattled their illusion of control. They began to wonder how many others would reflect their own darkness back to them if they dared to try again. While they scrambled to force entry into spaces they didn't belong, you waited at doors that opened on their own. They clawed and schemed to gain ground through cunning, but you simply stepped where you were called. That distinction became impossible for them to ignore. They fought to fabricate what you carried without effort. What flowed to you was not a product of secrets or bargains. It was trust, the kind that cannot be stolen, sold, or mimicked. You became a keeper of things they could never touch, a bearer of wisdom they couldn't even articulate. They watched you move in silence while they drowned in noise, and the realization froze them. They were playing a game they could never win. They invested years mastering empty tricks, but you moved through rooms they didn't even know existed. Where they constructed elaborate facades, you simply stood, and everything they built flickered out. They feared the simplicity of it, that you radiated what they could only pretend to possess. Their entire theater fell apart before someone who never needed to perform. They imitated presence. You embodied it. That truth stripped away their bravado and left only what they could not bear to face. Feel God's love stirring within you? Don't let it stop there. Hit the super thank you button and sow a seed of $20 or more. That simple act can ignite hope, heal hearts, and carry His love further than you imagine. You were made to shine His light. This is your moment. Be the miracle someone's been praying for. Let heaven move through you. What unsettles them most is knowing they could never replicate what forged you. They witnessed how much was stripped from you to reach this place. Yet none of them could bear that path, because it demanded surrender where they clung to pride. The gate they watched you pass through remains locked to anyone unwilling to let go of themselves. That is why they tried so hard to undo you. But the very doorway they envied became the wall that shielded you. They remain outside, rattling a lock they can never open. They assigned you as their conquest, convinced you were frail enough to crush easily. They mistook quietness for helplessness, solitude for defeat, and decided you were nothing more than a cracked branch waiting to break. To them, you looked small enough to pick off. But what they didn't see was how you'd been prepared to awaken after the blow, not before it. What appeared defenseless was already under watch. Each strike they delivered fell into a record they didn't know was being kept. They were certain you were their target, yet every move only positioned them for their own downfall. While they plotted your ruin in the shadows, they unwittingly wrote the script of their own collapse. Every trap they set disassembled itself in full view. Nothing subtle, nothing hidden. Their own hands exposed by the very snares they built. Your name carried like a cautionary tale through anyone bold enough to challenge you. They realized too late that what they thought was weakness was actually covered by laws beyond their reach. And now their missteps warn others away. Not because you fought back, but because what covers you does not lose track of you. Now your story echoes in places they wish it wouldn't, because the consequences of touching what they shouldn't are still rippling outward. Some lost things they'll never recover. Others fell into confusion they never planned for. None of it came from retaliation, just the inevitable response to a boundary they violated. You became the lesson everyone else watched unfold. They stood by as you climbed out of the holes they dug, walked through doors they thought they'd bolted, and flourished while they withered. They're still haunted by how you endured what was designed to finish you. They underestimated the silence that surrounded you, believing numbers alone could overpower you. They gathered in hidden rooms, fueled by each other's noise and arrogance, thinking a group could extinguish what only burns brighter under pressure. They mistook solitude for despair when it was actually your refining ground. In isolation, you were not sitting idle. You were being honed. Every sleepless night, every misunderstanding, every private disappointment carved away what didn't belong, until all that remained was unbreakable. You learned to navigate the unseen without an audience. You trained yourself to hear what no one else could, to move without applause, to grow without permission. What they mistook for fragility was precision born of silence. They were synchronized in chaos. You were deliberate in stillness. They leaned on each other for power, but you drew from a source they could never touch. That is why their plans never landed. While they assembled under false light, you were shaped in a furnace that asks nothing and takes everything. And still, you walked out whole. What rattles the most is realizing they cannot imitate what you endured to become this way. They glimpsed the cost written in your eyes, yet could never pay it themselves, because it required relinquishing everything they cling to. And they would rather shatter than let go. That is why they circled you, hoping to break what they envied, never understanding that the very depth they coveted was also your armor. They stand outside, scratching at a threshold that will never yield to them. They chose you as the perfect victim, assuming you were fragile, unseen, and easy to dismantle. To them, you resembled an exposed branch ready to snap, but your strength was disguised, waiting for the blow to reveal itself. You were never alone. You were observed, recorded, and covered in ways they could not detect. Every strike they dealt positioned them squarely in the path of their own undoing. While they schemed against you, they unknowingly triggered their own exposure. Every snare they crafted betrayed them in daylight. Every tactic they designed left fingerprints that ruined their disguise. Your name became a quiet alarm that made others pause before touching what they didn't understand. They learned you weren't preserved by accident. You were guarded by something far beyond their comprehension. Even now, whispers of your survival reach them like a chill, because the aftermath of what they started continues to unfold. Some lost things that can never return. Others are trapped in consequences they thought they'd escape. None of it came from revenge, only from crossing a boundary they never should have crossed. You became the reminder carved into their memory, the one they never stopped trying to forget. They gathered in secrecy, thinking sheer numbers would overwhelm you, mistaking silence for surrender. They surrounded you like storm clouds, confident you would dissolve under their weight. But in that solitude, you were not crumbling. You were being reforged. Every long night stripped away what wasn't yours to carry. Every quiet ache became another layer of resolve. You learned to move without witnesses, to sharpen your vision without noise, to hear what no one else could. That discipline born of isolation frightened them because it meant you didn't need the crutches they leaned on. They moved in crowds because they could not stand on their own. You moved alone because you had already learned how to stand. Their tools depended on reading and predicting their opponent, but you slipped through their hands like water, unreadable and uncatchable. They pried, scanned, guessed, and still found nothing, because your story was not written on any surface they could access. You were shaped by codes and truths beyond their reach, and their familiar methods produced only confusion and distortion. You became the question they couldn't answer, the variable they couldn't solve. They watched as their techniques dissolved into static and silence every time they approached you. No matter how they tried to chart your path, it always veered into mystery, and that mystery broke them because it revealed the limits of everything they thought they knew. Feel God's love stirring within you? Don't let it stop there. Hit the super thank you button and sow a seed of $20 or more. That simple act can ignite hope, heal hearts, and carry His love further than you imagine. You were made to shine His light. This is your moment. Be the miracle someone's been praying for. Let heaven move through you. They spent all their energy convincing you to forget yourself, to believe you were small, lost, ordinary. They flooded you with doubts and surrounded you with mirrors that reflected lies. Yet somewhere deep inside, you kept your grip on something they couldn't touch, that quiet certainty that you were more than what they wanted you to believe. That knowing, buried and stubborn, was what they sought to erase. Every whisper, every betrayal, every carefully constructed illusion was meant to sever you from it. But you never let go, because the moment you looked up and finally saw yourself clearly, everything they had built collapsed under its own weight. What unsettles them is how your awakening shattered everything they built in silence. This isn't paranoia, it's inevitability. The moment someone aligned with higher purpose remembers fully, the tremors reach further than they ever expected. Every presence assigned to derail you begins retreating. Every system that depended on your confusion starts crumbling under its own weight. They dread the instant your awareness fuses with your authority, when you stop hesitating and step directly into what was always yours. At that point, their grip loosens, their illusions collapse, and they lose all power to rewrite your reality. You transform into something they cannot withstand, not because of spectacle or defiance, but because of awareness. That clarity destabilizes everything they spent years constructing. The second it dawned on you, the second you reclaimed yourself, you stopped being reactive and began to govern. That shift made you immovable, not flawless, but firmly established where no one could unseat you. They've already realized it's too late. The disguise is gone. The truth about who you are can't be buried again. That single revelation does more harm to their ambitions than any noise or ritual ever could. They didn't just aim to hurt you. They designed the perfect machinery to erase you. They engineered situations so calculated, so suffocating, so exact. They were certain you wouldn't emerge intact. They didn't throw random chaos. They meticulously stacked betrayals sharp enough to cut, traps set to drain every ounce of resolve, and isolation designed to fracture you from within. They studied where you were most tender and struck there with precision. What they didn't count on was watching you rise cleaner and lighter than before. You didn't simply endure what should have undone you. You walked away unmarked, untwisted, and without the bitterness they'd hoped to seed in you. That unsettled them most. They thought the infernos they lit would leave you disfigured, paralyzed, haunted. Instead, you emerged steadier, clearer, unburdened. They waited for collapse, but watched transformation instead. You now move with ease, with joy, with certainty, carrying a glow they can't decipher. They know what they unleashed against you, and yet they see no ash, no shadow, no residue, only someone untouchable in ways they can't undo. What they designed to destroy you instead refined you, and that realization haunts them. If even their most precise cruelty couldn't break you, nothing they have left will. They hurled every weapon, whispers, sabotage, accusations, and still they see you standing, more unshakable than ever. Now they tremble, not because of what you said, but because of what you became while they watched. You became undeniable proof that resilience isn't about outward blessings, but about what survives the storm intact. You exposed the limits of everything they trust in, because no matter how ruthless the onslaught became, it could not swallow someone tested and tempered from above. Now your very survival reminds them of their failure. You are no longer who you were before. You're beyond their reach. They know if everything they threw couldn't end you then, it never could have. They had mastery of technique, skill, and cunning. Years spent perfecting their methods of coercion and control, confident in their craft. And yet it all dissolved in the face of something they never understood. Your quiet surrender to something greater. No retaliation, no theatrics, just consistent, steady alignment that dismantled everything they orchestrated. What unsettles them is that you operate in a way they cannot decipher. They cannot grasp how someone who never played by their rules became the fracture in their foundation. They function through domination, but you move in rhythm with something beyond their reach, a higher resonance. Every time you chose to trust what you could not see, even when everything screamed otherwise, you awakened dimensions they could never step into. Each quiet act of trust dismantled pillars they thought were unshakable. You dismantled them not by fighting, but by aligning. You mended when told to let go, stayed when everything told you to run, walked away when staying seemed easier, and spoke when silence felt safer. Those seemingly small choices released consequences and justice they never anticipated, overturning entire structures without you even being aware. That is what disturbs them. Not your force, but your surrender. Surrender dismantles darkness because it moves in currents that bypass logic and strike straight at the root. You don't react with counterattacks or noise. You withdraw when led, let go when it hurts, move quietly when unseen. Your faith does not perform, it commands. Every deliberate step you take topples something they thought permanent. They engineer plans with calculation, but you carry something far rarer. Real-time direction no script or ritual can touch. That terrifies them because no spell or tactic can intercept it. You don't need to understand their schemes. You only need to recognize your next instruction. That single awareness is enough to unravel their entire strategy. Your alignment does not just shield, it releases judgment into places they thought protected. They watch you closely now because they cannot predict your next move. You move without broadcasting, without planning as they do. You listen, and when you listen, unseen realms respond. Barriers collapse, doors open, heaviness lifts, and their illusions dissolve. Your yes weighs more than their entire arsenal. It has dawned on them that they were never fighting you, only the harmony you walk in, and that is a battle they will always lose. This was never only about your present. What targeted you reached far back, trying to keep alive patterns etched into your family line long before you arrived. Cycles of scarcity, silence, self-destruction, confusion, and conflict were planted generations ago. You inherited wars you never chose, but were chosen to finish. They assumed you would buckle under the same burdens your bloodline carried before you. They counted on you echoing the same habits, collapsing under shame, retreating into bitterness or fear. But you questioned everything, confronted what others ran from, and stayed in the discomfort long enough to break chains untouched for decades. You did not simply endure attacks. You unstitched ancient agreements, one quiet act at a time. Every tear, every refusal to retreat, every choice to keep going. You became the disruption no one expected. The patterns that relied on your silence and confusion faltered because you stood up. What you carry now is not just survival. It is a strategy that undoes their entire framework. They scramble now because their grip loosens, and you are still pressing forward. You frighten them because you are not just recovering. You are reconstructing. You are rewriting the story, forging a path your lineage has never seen before. You are planting clarity, strength, identity, and peace where only rubble stood, and nothing they attempt can reverse it without a cost they cannot afford. What unsettles them most is that you became the force they never accounted for, not because of a title or position, but because of unshakable will. Without needing recognition or an audience, you tore through layers of oppression with resolve forged in silence. What once mocked your family line now recoils because it realizes you are not backing down. You carry a presence that disrupts everything they built. You don't just end their efforts. You ignite